Scott, thanks so much for staying on with us. As far as the appointment process, which happens, Pope Francis had nearly appointed 80% of the cardinal electors who are going to be responsible for voting for the next pope. Do you feel whoever's next will be carrying forward those progressive ideologies and policies of Pope Francis?
Well, if you don't mind, and I'm going to glance at my phone because I've got a list of the people who may succeed him.
Yes.
And there's a very wide range of folks who could do. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, who is from Italy, would I think be most in line with where Pope Francis has been. He is very much in a sense of those ideas that we've talked about in terms of social justice. But again, he takes certain conservative stances on what he calls, for example, gender ideology, which would track in a way where the Pope had not been quite as forthright on some ideas of women's rights, although he had been quite forthright on LGBT rights. Cardinal Petro Erdo, in contrast to his from Hungary, is very conservative. He would be a throwback to Pope Benedict, for example, Pope Francis's predecessor. The church would cut back away from these positions that Francis had taken in more than 12 years. If you go all the way to what you call the progressive position, Cardinal Tagle of the Philippines, of course, who would be, therefore, a pope from Asia, he is very much beyond Francis in terms of taking stances, including on LGBT rights, to be even more forthright. There is the issue, for example, as to whether the church could move and embrace married priests, whether clergymen could marry within the church, something that Francis never actually embraced. And then if you go all the way to what we might call the arch-conservative, the hard right, if you will, Cardinal Burke in the United States, who we referred to earlier, the man who in 2016 and 2023 filed complaints against Pope Francis and called for the church to pull back on its positions. He would be, I think, someone pushed very hard by those who think the church should be much more firmly against any moves regarding women's rights, LGBT rights, environmental activism, and indeed social activism. So there's a wide spectrum there. There's a few other candidates as well, but it just shows you that this conclave could go in any one of a number of directions. But I come back to your point that you made, with Francis appointing 80% of the cardinals who will make that decision. The best indication would be that I expect the church not to make a radical move either to the progressive side or to the arch-conservative side.
Thanks, Scott. I'd like to now quickly cut across to Jyotsna. Jyotsna, the Indian Prime Minister has reacted to the news of the passing of Pope Francis. If you can take us through the reactions that have just come in.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has reacted. Let me just go through his statement on social media X. He says, deeply pained by the passing of His Holiness Pope Francis. In this hour of grief and remembrance, my heartfelt condolences to the global Catholic community. Pope Francis will always be remembered as a beacon of compassion, humility, and spiritual courage by millions across the world. And we were just discussing how J.D. Vance had posted on today morning about his meeting with Pope Francis. He has just reacted. He just said, I just learned of the passing of Pope Francis. My heart goes out to the millions of Christians all over the world who loved him. I was happy to see him yesterday, though he was obviously very ill. So, of course, J.D. Vance did observe that. But I'll always remember him for the below homily he gave in the very early days of COVID. He was really quite beautiful. May God rest his soul. J.D. Vance has also reacted. So reactions do keep coming in. We will be looking forward to any more reactions. And of course, I'll be tracking that as well.
Thanks, Jyotsna. Scott, let me quickly come back to you. I had to... going over the reactions that we are seeing, of course, as we were discussing earlier, this is the time that you pay tribute to the life that Pope Francis lived, and maybe a bit too early to be discussing, who comes next. But, that is an eventuality which one needs to face. He was not in the best of health, and we've gone over the basic understanding of the procedures which are going to be followed, the election process which is going to be done, and the progressive ideologies, which Pope Francis was known for, and he was also criticized for. But as far as whoever is next, what kind of a, I would say, boon or a burden comes along with following Pope Francis?
I think it's going to be a heavy challenge for whoever succeeds in part because, as you mentioned, it's much easier to follow someone who hasn't done a good job or who has not been very prominent. Pope Francis leaves a very big footprint, if we may call it that way. But the successor also comes in at a time when the church, the Catholic Church, still, I think, is trying to deal with some fundamental issues. I don't think it's completely past issues about the behavior that we've talked about on the part of some of the clergymen over the past decades. Pope Francis tried to put a line under that several years ago by saying bishops need to be accountable for sexual abuse. But I think there are some in the church who still feel that there was a sense of betrayal there. I think that the church, however, not only has the issues in terms of its own conduct to continue to talk about, it's in a very turbulent world. We've already mentioned some of the conflicts in which many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of civilians are being killed, in which millions have been displaced. Does the church intervene and make comment on that? The church comes into a world where, in response to those millions who had been displaced, Pope Francis had argued for compassion, had argued for acceptance of those migrants, those refugees,